Hello and welcome to Stop the Press. I'm Rob Chadwick and I'm a lecturer at Exeter College of Journalism. I'm here with Nick Copson, as usual, ex-head of marketing with Reach for 20 plus years and a range of other national news and media outlets. And I'm here with Bill Martin, who was 35 years in regional press, 20 years editor for both morning and evening titles. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Rob.
Hello, Rob. Hello, Bill.
Hello, Nick.
Hello.
Can I start by talking about Nick's trainers? Nick is wearing the most garish pair of pink trainers you've ever seen in your life. He's got a new girlfriend and it's really clear.
It's very obvious.
Yeah, he's trying to impress.
This is where I wish, or I'm sort of glad we haven't got a YouTube channel as well at the moment, because I can't actually show anyone in them.
Yeah, that would be a treat for all concerned.
I am very proud.
What
I'm very
colour
proud
would
of
you
them.
describe them as? What colour?
Purple.
Purple. Oh, I'd go pink.
With a Kermit green swoosh.
I like to dress conservatively in colour on my clothes, but on my trainers I like something a bit more lively. So,
well, that's nice for all concerned.
You've achieved. Box ticked.
Okay, so the order of business today is that we're going to talk about, well, the question is, why doesn't anyone watch the news today? And if I just start out with a few little stats to get us going, to show you what we mean by that, if I can find the stats, minute. Oh, there we go. Right, so in 1990, the BBC and ITV News at, I think it was probably 9 and 10 o'clock at that time, used to draw in, between them, 17.8 million viewers. Right now, those two between them bring in 7 million viewers, so much less than half what used to be. And yet the population has grown by 8 million people in that time. So there's the underlying stats behind what we're talking about. So I just throw it out to you guys. You've worked in the industry for all of that period of time, from 1990 onwards. Tell me, why don't people watch the news anymore?
I think there are lots of reasons. I could name things like, distrust in media. I could name things like information overload. I could name things like, the shift to social media, which, the old algorithms will play a part. And I could say things like attention span deficits. I could look at myself, and I'm definitely guilty of this. I definitely watch less news. I consume less news than ever before. Doesn't mean I'm not aware. I tend to grab my information in bursts and snippets, and I think that's part of the problem, really. We're all very, very busy. Either busy on purpose, there's competing priorities all over the place, certainly for me anyway. That comes with it inherently attention span problems, which I do have. And it's not just me. I know that the whole world is suffering from that, especially the younger generations. But I look back, 30 years ago, news was the main ticket in town. I used to, if you're reading the newspaper or the television, the 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. news bulletins and headlines, they had your attention. Now there's just so much competing for your attention. And my brain struggles with that level of input, frankly. And for that reason, I pay less attention. Doesn't mean I'm not concerned. Doesn't mean I'm not interested. I might find it in different channels and different places. But I struggle with it. I really do struggle with it.
How about yourself, Bill?
Well, very similar. I mean, I think platform's a major thing, isn't it? The figures you quoted there about BBC and ITV and people actually not watching the news now, that could probably be explained through platform, couldn't it, and the rise of competitive media. But I think, more than anything, information overload and the fact that you effectively carry the news around in your pocket now means you can read it any time. So, I mean, I particularly, and nearly everyone I know, have lost the habit of sitting down to watch the news at a set time, or even sitting down to read the paper, or putting aside that little period of time in the day. Mainly because you don't need to. You know everything. You're getting bombarded with information, mainly via your phone, or by the radio. So I think, the change in platform is a major thing. Information overload, as Nick's already alluded to, I think is, it kind of never stops, does it? News just keeps coming at you. I mean, I listen to a lot of radio, and, it's on the hour and every half hour. And it's kind of like, guys, give it a rest.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
They repeat themselves, don't they?
Yes,
and
they do.
You feel a bit like you're in a land of deja vu.
Yeah.
You're not sure if this is brand new or just the repeated headline, or, it's...
And even then, if you decide to switch station, if you go from, I listen to a lot of Planet Rock, and when I'm not listening to the BBC, those sort of things. But you can tune into something else. It might be Greatest Hits 80s or something like that. It's the same bulletin, exactly the same bulletin, because you've got news factories selling radio stations and things. So there's that element of information overload. The other thing I think is a major contributor now, certainly in people I know and some stuff I read now, is mental health.
Yes.
It's a bit like...
I was going to mention that.
I was going to mention it as well.
In the gym I work in, and the two things that get spoken about most are the menopause and mental health. Everything is kind of put down to one of those two issues. And I think people are much more aware of looking after their own mental health now, and sometimes, and I know several people who've made a conscious decision not to watch, read, listen to, or have any news in their life at all, just because it's so depressing.
Yeah, I used to love nature programs, and for the same reason I've stopped watching it. It's just too depressing what we're doing to animals around the world. It's just too depressing. I can't watch them at all, because it's just, that all of those amazing animals are under threat because of what we do to the world, and I can't cope with it anymore.
And I totally agree. And the thing within that is, of course, and Bill, you know better than anyone, because of your role as an editor, is that unfortunately bad news often sells better than good news.
Does it? Always.
Yeah. So and the news publishers, be it online, TV, radio, print, they're obviously chasing audience.
Yeah.
So the more bad news, in many ways, the better, right? And it just becomes, you get that combination of information overload combined with information overload plus bad news, means that you've got, a complete emotional burnout for people. I noticed this during COVID. It never really affected me before. But I became very, 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 very angry during COVID because of the way the news, not only what they were obviously publicising, in terms of, obviously the public health, should we say, but I was getting angry with the way they were doing it and what they weren't saying and what they were saying. And I found myself being really affected by it. And I went through a period where I just thought, I can't watch this anymore. I'd rather just live in ignorant bliss. The less I knew, the happier I was, in many ways.
One of the things that annoyed me about COVID, actually, was people watched that first briefing from Boris and then didn't bother finding out anything more about it. By the September of the first year, it had been publicised and everyone had said, you don't need to wipe your tables anymore, you can't carry it, you can't catch it from surfaces and stuff. Yet people in my work were still doing it 6 months later. No one was interested in actually finding out any facts or truth about it at all after the initial thing where you were told, right, you don't have to work, and that was it. Glee, excellent, I don't have to work, fantastic, the government will pay for me, fantastic. And people, and they weren't interested in COVID, they just wanted the time off work.
Well, unfortunately, that's something else that's been revealed in the last few years. In the rise of the internet, when news organisations started tracking in detail, exactly what people are reading or what people are interested in. It was a real eye opener for our newsrooms when we first started doing that around 2010, maybe a bit earlier than that actually. When we began to have to accept, quite reluctantly, I have to say, for many of us, that a lot of what we were doing and what we thought were very important and we should be covering because it was important for our readers and that thing, nobody was reading.
They wanted Love Island.
They did.
Yeah,
they wanted Love Island.
So not necessarily bad news, more kind of just celebrity tittle-tattle. And it goes back to that. It's too depressing to hear about all that stuff. Tell me the stuff that's a bit more gossipy.
I think the other thing, with news so available now, and the fact that news is always around us, it's not just the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news now. So once you've been through something like a global pandemic, And once the country has survived a government like Boris Johnson's, because, we sort of forget about some of the detail around
And Les Truss's.
It was unbelievable, the sort of day-to-day things that were coming out, whatever it was, whether it was Partygate, whether it was, so-and-so was having an affair, whether it was Dominic Cummings, and he's driving off to where, to test his eye. I mean, it was like a comedy show, wasn't it?
So a really bad one.
Once you've been through that, and once you then, you're dealing with a sort of more mundane reporting of day-to-day politics, and that's definitely something that happened more under Rishi Sunak and now under Starmer, isn't it? They're less colourful characters than Boris and his coterie of idiots. Nonsense. It all becomes a bit dull, doesn't it? And I think that's another problem, is we've sort of been overloaded with this sort of sensational news. We've all survived a pandemic. There's a war going on in Ukraine still. Anyone remember that?
Well, I mean, I do, because I listen to Frontline on the Times every day. But
do you know what I mean?
Radio,
and
but,
I
I
can
know
remember
exactly what you
very
mean.
early on, people saying we've got to keep this war in the headlines, we've got to keep taking aid and that sort of thing, because if it goes on for too long, we'll all get we'll get war fatigue. Blah blah blah. Well, that's happened, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And everyone's, people have switched off for that, and it's a phenomenon in America now. There's a movement. There's sort of no news movement.
Is that?
And
I didn't know.
And there's quite a lot of academic writing that's been about it, and people saying, that your life will be better if you don't have news in it anymore. And all of those reasons we've just discussed are being talked about in the sort of no news movement in the States.
That's quite interesting, but that's quite dangerous. If that message was pumped out by a nefarious government that wanted to get away with stuff, then basically what you're doing is pumping out something that says, don't take any notice of what's going on, let us just get on with it.
Is that not what a nefarious government, maybe in the United States, is doing anyway?
Probably is, yeah. Well, that's why I mentioned it, yeah.
Anything off agenda for them is dismissed as fake news.
Yes, exactly.
I think what I'll do is a little piece of homework off the back of this podcast is I was listening to you there, I might actually just focus on one news source for the next few weeks and just see what it does to my mental health, if I can analyse it, because at the moment I subscribe to Apple News. I probably mentioned this before, and if you go into Apple News, you can essentially choose what news sources you want to be fed to you, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be as broad read as possible, so I've got quite a few covering, sport, news, lifestyle, economics, all sorts of stuff, finance,
Fashion.
Not fashion, as you can see, right? But plenty of basketball, and I sometimes look at it and I can feel myself like sweating because I'm just fed so much information that I feel like unless I can zone in on this, I'm going to forget something really important in life, like what shoes to wear or stuff like that. I just feel like my brain's going to pop sometimes. So I might as a little test, I might just remove it and go, right, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to watch BBC, Newsnight, news headlines, Question Time maybe. And just,
oh, God, that is depressing.
I know, but just focus in on what they're saying to me and remove all this superfluous crap and just focus on that and see how I feel about it.
Do you think
I said that, I won't do that, by the way. Sorry, hold that thought, because actually last week I cancelled my TV license.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
Oh, that's interesting, because you were talking about it at the last one, weren't you? Yeah.
So that's it. No more BBC for you.
Apparently, yes.
The thing is, though, if you've got a TV, you've got to have a license, haven't you? It's like, irrespective of whether you watch it or not.
Well, you've got to have you have to watch broadcast or live format stuff, or you record live format stuff, right? So if you watch stream stuff, you're fine. So
right.
So can you watch sport?
If it's live, no.
Okay.
on the BBC
or any channel.
Oh, that seems like a brave decision.
Yeah.
How do you watch your basketball?
On YouTube, streaming after 24 hours after it happens. Honestly,
so you are trying to turn yourself into a young person.
Yeah, can't you tell? Sorry, Rob, you're going to go somewhere.
Part young person, part conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Where was I going to go with that? Sorry, carry on. I've lost my train of thought now because of that.
I was saying about watching Newsnight, Question Time, and the news.
Yes. So do you think that one of the reasons people have disengaged with the news is because no one really wants to say anything interesting anymore? If you watch Question Time, it's a whole hour of politicians saying, that's not the question, this is the question, and basically saying the same thing over and over and over again, which is what they want to say, and not answering questions. Do you think, whereas I think back to the 80s, and I may be romanticising it, but I don't believe they used to do that. I believe politicians used to give a straight answer to a straight question. And I think since maybe Blair, that's not been the case because it's been about managing the media instead. Do you think that's contributed to the fact that people can't engage with the news anymore because they just think, what's the point? I'm not being told anything. No one ever answers. I find it incredibly frustrating listening to a political interview these days.
Agreed.
Well, try listening to Prime Minister's Question Time. You know, sometimes it's hard to appreciate that the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition are actually having a conversation with each other because neither of them answers each other's questions. It's this sort of it's extraordinary.
It's prepared jokes in inverted commas, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you're right. You know, the ministers on the media rounds, there's one this morning, wasn't there? God, that seems a long time ago already. It was talking about changes in education, things like that. But it was, you know, it was so scripted, and it was the same minister going on to every platform giving the same sort of non-answers. That it gets very boring.
I was thinking exactly that. I think I was listening to 5 Live and someone said to them, what about all the U-turns? It's like, how can we trust what you're saying now? And they said, well, because we've got this measure and this measure and this measure. And they had to say 2 or 3 times, what about the U-turns? What about the U-turns? And just wouldn't engage in the answer at all.
Yeah, I mean, there was that famous, it's been going on for a long time.
The Michael Howard interview.
Yeah. Well, that one, wasn't there? And wasn't there a famous one between Robin Day and Margaret Thatcher?
Oh, yeah.
Google it. That's a bit of a perler. So, you know, that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think media management, and particularly political media management, and it doesn't matter, you know, and sports stars are as guilty of this as anyone, aren't they? You know, some mundane answers out of footballers and international cricketers now, which say absolutely nothing. Has contributed to, I think, the greatest thing we haven't spoken about yet, which is trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that sort of belief now in that people are being informed accurately and fairly is not what it once was.
I think going back to COVID, I think that didn't help. I think we were on a downward trajectory in terms of trust anyway, but COVID has really polarised it. There were people who trusted implicitly everything the government said. There were people who thought, this is great, I get some time off work. And there were people who just questioned everything and found it to be totally untrustworthy.
Well, it goes back further than that, though, doesn't it? It goes back, you know, well into Brexit.
Yeah.
You know, the whole £350 million a day for the NHS.
Yeah.
Was it a day or a week? Whatever. Anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There's 2 forms of trust, though, isn't it? There's the trust in the politicians or the sports star or whoever you want to talk about, who are, you know, essentially peddling a line or an agenda that fits their own narrative, right? Or it's also distrust in the media themselves due to their political persuasions and how they're reporting something. And obviously that escalates even more onto social media, of course, because of algorithms. You know, so there's two forms.
Why do you say that like that?
Well, because
algorithms.
Well, because they almost become a cliche, don't they? But we are a bit hesp to them because ultimately the social media organisations will be prioritising what they want you to be looking at. And of course, we talked about echo chambers before. And if you end up just going down one political bias or one form of entertainment on there, then you're going to get more of that crap served at you anyway. So you know, I'm using it as a bit of a cliche, really. Algorithms, you know, they're a very real thing. They're a real problem for us.
I know a couple of people who have gone properly anti-woke, and they just won't engage with the BBC or ITV or anything anymore at all. They just go.
Is it you?
It's not me.
It's you, isn't it? It's
absolutely
you.
Isn't. I don't think I'm anti-woke. I think I'm a centrist that just can't cope with extremism, either way. Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of people who have, and they just say, I don't watch the BBC at all because it's much too woke for me. And it's like, I kind of get it, But actually, that's not the case. If you just listen to it, the BBC are giving you a non-biased opinion. But what they really mean is they're not being told what they want to hear, and that comes back to those algorithms where you find that if you go online, you get told news that you believe. That's not the same as the truth, is it?
No. And I think the issue of trust goes beyond the media, doesn't it? And funnily enough, the better the media does its job, sometimes it can erode trust even more, doesn't it? Because now we all know about corrupt police officers, some issues with the Catholic Church, politicians. The MP's expense. You go back to the MP's expenses stories. The greatest bit of investigative journalism, I think. When I was, I wasn't involved in it, but.
And then you've got the whole Prince Andrew thing with the royals.
Prince Andrew. Everyone, it's kind of like everyone we used to have trust in, or we looked up to, or even sports stars now, or rock stars, even.
I think we could never trust the rock stars.
Yeah, but did we think they were as bad as P. Diddy?
They were as bad as P. Diddy.
I'm sure they probably were.
You're spot on though, and as you're talking there, I'm thinking what I said a while ago about ignorant bliss. It feels like the point of getting more informed is obviously hopefully to be smarter, right, or wiser, or whatever, right. If you're not informed, okay, you might for that reason you're obviously ill informed. You're not smarter or wiser, but actually you might actually be happier, right. Now that's an awful way. That's an awful way to live life, but. Will I be happier if I
never meet your heroes? We've known it for a long time, haven't we? Never meet your heroes.
If I don't read the news or discover what the newspapers are trying to uncover on the Catholic Church, will I be happier because of that?
You can still believe in the Catholic Church at that point, can't you?
I don't believe it anyway. But
have you seen the film Spotlight?
That's a brilliant.
I have.
Film.
It's a fantastic.
Absolutely, it was one of my favourite films.
Yeah, it's really
amazing. Good. Journalists do job.
Yes,
and they do a great job,
spectacularly well. In that case, and but a lot of people probably don't feel more comfortable in life knowing what they know as a result of journalists doing that.
Yeah. The best piece of let's say political kind of outspokenness and the news reporting I've seen recently was Donald Trump on the White House lawns getting into a helicopter a few weeks ago. Did you see that? Did you not see that?
Which one?
When he was
when he swore.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant.
I don't know.
I'm not going to repeat it because obviously the language would be blue. But he just came out with it. I thought that's the first time I've seen a politician swear.
Oh no, I did see
ever.
It. Yeah, I did see it.
But he was just speaking his mind, and I loved it.
At last.
Yeah.
He wasn't. Someone said that.
Yeah, he just came out with it. I thought genuine. That's genuine.
That was where he was talking about his defence secretary, wasn't it? And said something along the lines of, "I don't give a."
No.
They
called a ceasefire, hadn't they, between Israel and Iran that he had apparently brokered.
The least effective ceasefire.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Israel immediately broke it.
So did Iran.
He is desperate for his peace prize.
And he went. He went. What you've got is two countries who've been fighting so long and so hard they don't know what they're doing anymore. And I thought
that's 100% correct. Yeah,
he's right.
He was angry, clearly.
Yeah.
But I appreciated it.
Right? Yeah.
So, anyway.
So, did you appreciate front page news? So, the only time politics gets onto the front page or proper news gets onto the front page, and as Love Island nowadays, is when the Chancellor cries in Prime Minister's questions, isn't it? So, did you appreciate that? A bit of real emotion from Rachel Reeves?
I thought it was uncomfortable.
I thought it was really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't.
And then having to explain it afterwards and stuff.
Well, unfortunately, that's when she is the Chancellor. And she is the Chancellor of what are we? I think we're still the 5th biggest economy in the world, aren't we? By some miracle.
Yeah.
So therefore, how she is, and the fact that it appeared that Starmer didn't back her, didn't even seem to notice she was crying, which was a bit odd as well.
It was all very odd, wasn't it?
It was odd, wasn't it?
Yeah. A really good metaphor.
So in a sense,
Keir Starmer just carrying on while absolute turmoil goes on behind him.
But so she had to explain that, didn't she? In a sense, it's a personal matter and that sort of thing. But again, that's at the point when I go, yeah, right.
Yeah, of course it wasn't a personal matter. Yeah.
So it's funny how in time, contrast that with Kate Middleton, I still call her.
Yeah.
Prince William's wife, when she, and everyone was speculating, the marriage is on the rocks, we haven't seen her for ages. And when she came out and she said, well, actually, I've got cancer.
Yeah.
And suddenly there's a sort of tumbleweed moment where everyone goes, oh. So sometimes if you're going to address something, I think you need to address it, don't you? Otherwise
the conspiracy theorists
people
take
just
over.
Going to roll their eyes and go, yeah, people just don't believe particularly what politicians say now.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, no, they don't. So how can we get people watching the news again? What is it, a media job or is it a politician's job? What's going to happen in order for to turn this situation around? Or are people actually okay? The question before that is: are people less informed than they were 30, 40 years ago? Then, do you think people are less informed about the news, or are they actually consuming the news but just getting it from bits on social media?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, are people less informed? I mean, I think it's amazing if you ask people in general, how informed they are about particular issues. People aren't that interested.
No.
In lots of things. People are interested in football, EastEnders. I'm being quite dismissive now. About how much their weekly shop's going to cost. Those types of things. People aren't as interested in the cut and thrust of what's going on in the Commons or, so policy committees or, subcommittees and that sort of thing discussing, how HS2 money's been spent and things like that. I don't think people really care.
Do you think they used to?
I think there was a much, and again, maybe I'm romanticising this a bit like you do, but I think there was, we held politicians, football stars, policemen, priests, doctors in much higher stand than we do now. So we kind of used to believe what they said.
Yeah. I remember Blair getting in 97 and feeling there was a genuine mood of excitement around the country at that point that something might change and something might be better. I definitely remember that. And I also remember how that kind of ebbed away and it felt like during that term was where people lost their trust in politics without a doubt. And then, of course, there was 9/11 and that everyone was all over the news in 9/11 and maybe that was like the apex of the news consumption bit as well. And after that, everything
also probably the lack of trust as well, though, because of the war, the Afghanistan war, and after that, and all sorts of stuff. So
things tailed off after that.
I think I'm more than I think people are more informed than ever, and I'm more informed than ever. Right? I think the problem is that I'm less informed on specific matters. So to your point about the news headlines, I don't know enough about any specific headline to be able to have a conversation with somebody at the moment, unless I purposely go and sit and watch it in preparation. But I'm more informed than ever before about the wider world and what's going on, but I know snippets of it, bits and bobs. Right?
My daughter tried to have a conversation with me the other day about Bob Villan.
Oh, yeah.
At
Glastonbury.
Yeah, at Glastonbury, and what he'd said and what happened wasn't wrong, and did I agree with the BBC being criticised for continuing to stream the show, etc., etc. So I could talk about the sort of editorial decision. I was able to discuss with her the editorial decision-making and how that might have happened and whether I agree with it and things like that. But when we got into the issues around Palestine and Gaza, which she also wanted to talk to me a bit about, because she's an engaged young person, that sort of thing, I thought to myself, I actually don't know.
But I think that's a thing that comes with age. I think you're very committed when you're young. You go, this is what I believe. And as you get older, you start seeing the other side of things a bit more, and it's much more, I don't know.
Well, I'm a bit like Donald Trump with that. Like, it just seems to be going on forever, all that, doesn't it?
Yeah. I don't know what's right and wrong in all of that. It's like...
I don't think anyone knows. No.
Well, there's a lot of people who think they know.
But go back to your question, is this, how do we get more into... I think this isn't going to change. I think, we'll become busier, less purposeful in that regard. I think the social media channels and other ones that are still to come, that we don't know about yet, will make this worse. And I think we'll all consume more and more news and content, but it'll just be shorter and shorter and shorter. And the generation will change that. The next generation will change that and change that. So I don't see it changing. Sorry to be negative, but
What about yourself, Bill?
Well, I think it's a societal issue, isn't it? And I think trust is at the heart of that. I mean, I think platform is contributory, but I think you can already see on the platforms, particularly on the TV streaming services and things like that, that the appetite for quality information is still there. You can see it. Again, you go back to the 80s. You could almost name the documentaries that were made back then, couldn't you? There was Panorama, there was the World at One, or whatever it was, and that was it.
Arena,
the serious one. Was that the slightly arty one?
Yes,
it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But now, go to the documentary section on Netflix. All sorts.
Yeah.
Some of it very good.
Some of it
a bit pappy.
Advertising stuff by people made for themselves, like Beckham.
Yeah, but some of it very good.
Yeah.
And all the streaming service involved in that. And so I think the appetite for well-researched, well-documented information is still out there.
yeah.
Whether or not society is going to turn back towards the news and that sort of thing.
That's a brilliant moment to bring the podcast to bring this to the end, because our next episode is going to be about podcast on long form journalism and the new way forward in terms of the news. So well done, Bill. It's almost like we scripted that, isn't it? Thank you for listening to this episode, everybody. We'll be back in a week's time with one about podcasts and long form news.